My fiance's parents said they wouldn't bless the marriage unless I signed a prenup, so I revealed something that changed everything. Donovan and I had been together for 3 years when he proposed. His parents owned a pharmaceutical empire worth billions. At our engagement party, his mother, Francine, pulled me aside. "We need to discuss the prenuptial agreement," she said, her smile never reaching her eyes. I'd expected this. Donovan warned me his parents protected their assets religiously. What I hadn't expected was the document they presented 2 weeks later. 47 pages of restrictions. No claim to family assets. No alimony. If we divorced, I'd leave with exactly what I brought in. Nothing. It's standard, his father Garrett explained during dinner at their estate. All our children sign them. Donovan squeezed my hand under the table. "It's just paperwork," he whispered. But page 32 made me pause. A morality clause. Any behavior that could damage the family reputation would void the marriage immediately. I'd forfeit everything, including custody of future children. Define damaging behavior, I asked. Francine's eyes gleamed. Criminal activity, substance abuse, mental illness requiring institutionalization, infidelity, anything that could harm our company's image. Mental illness. The words echoed in my head. For 3 days, I said nothing. Donovan grew increasingly frustrated. "Just sign it," he pleaded. That's when I made my decision. At Sunday dinner, with his entire family present, parents, his sister Celeste, brother Quentin, I placed a manila folder on the table. "Before I sign anything, there's something you should know." Garrett's jaw tightened. "If this is some negotiation tactic, it's not." I opened the folder. "These are my medical records from Riverside Psychiatric Hospital." The room went silent. I'd been admitted at 14 after my first psychotic break, bipolar disorder with schizoaffective features, 3 involuntary holds before I turned 18. The medications that kept me stable cost $3,000 a month. Donovan stared at the papers, color draining from his face. "You never told me. You never asked about my teenage years. I just said they were difficult." Francine's voice was ice. "This is exactly why we have the morality clause." "I know," I said calmly. "That's why I'm telling you now." I pulled out more document. "I've been stable for 8 years. Never missed a dose of medication." Celeste leaned forward. "Why hide it until now?" I wasn't hiding. I was protecting myself from exactly this reaction. Garrett stood up. "The wedding is off. We won't have our bloodline contaminated." "Contaminated?" I interrupted. "Your fortune is built on selling these exact medications." I pulled out my phone and showed them a screen. "This is Lisoprene. Your company manufactures it. It's my primary mood stabilizer. You've made $12 million from this drug alone last year." The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Quentin spoke for the first time. "So you're essentially saying our family profits from your illness?" "I'm saying your family profits from mental health treatment while simultaneously discriminating against those who need it." Donovan hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. "There's more," I said quietly. I pulled out the final document, a genetic testing report. "Bipolar disorder has a strong hereditary component, 60 to 80% chance of passing it on." Francine's face went white. "But here's what you don't know," I continued. "Your nephew, Celeste's son, his behavioral issues, the special school, I recognized the signs immediately." Celeste gasped. "How dare you? Check his symptoms against the diagnostic criteria." That's when Garrett grabbed the papers from my hand and noticed something else. His expression changed completely. His hands began to shake. "These medical records," he whispered. "The treating physician, Dr. Patricia Morgan." The name was printed clearly at the top of every document. Garrett sank back into his chair. The blood had drained from his face completely. "You know her?" I said. It wasn't a question. Francine moved to her husband's side. "Garrett, what's wrong?" He couldn't speak, just stared at the signature on my intake forms. I pulled out one more document. I'd saved this for last, not knowing if I'd need it. Dr. Morgan had given it to me 6 months ago when I'd asked about my treatment history. Dr. Morgan was one of the pioneering psychiatrists in treating bipolar disorder in the 1980s, I said. She worked at Riverside before opening her private practice. She kept meticulous records of all her patients. I slid a photocopy across the table, including a 17-year-old boy admitted in 1984 after a manic episode. He'd been arrested for reckless driving, claimed he could fly, hadn't slept in 6 days. Garrett's medical record. Same hospital, same doctor, same diagnosis. The silence that followed was suffocating. "That's impossible," Francine finally said, but her voice wavered. "Dr. Morgan remembered you," I told Garrett. "When she saw your name as my emergency contact, she mentioned she treated a Garrett Ashford decades ago. She assumed you were related." I did some digging. Quentin grabbed the paper. "Dad, it was a misdiagnosis," Garrett said weakly. "Youthful mistake." I was stressed, that's all. "Is that why you still see Dr. Reeves every month?" I asked. "The appointments your assistant schedules as business meetings?" I'd learned about those 3 weeks ago. Donovan's father disappeared the second Tuesday of every month for exactly 50 minutes. When I'd asked his assistant about it, she'd been evasive. A simple record search of psychiatrists in the area had done the rest. "You've been on lithium for 40 years, I continued. "Same as me. Different medication, same purpose. Mood stabilization." Francine sat down hard. "You told me those were for your heart." "They are," Garrett stammered. "Lithium can affect—" "Don't," I interrupted. "I've taken lithium. I know every side effect, every interaction, every reason someone takes it. And it's not for your heart." Celeste was crying now. "Why wouldn't you tell us?" "Because of this," Garrett gestured wildly at the table. "This exact reaction, the shame, the judgment, the morality clause," I added quietly. He looked at me then, really looked at me. "How long have you known?" 2 weeks. Dr. Morgan mentioned she'd treated a Garrett Ashford when I asked her to compile my records for the prenup. I wasn't sure it was you until I started checking. Your assistant was very helpful once I explained I was your future daughter-in-law. This is blackmail, Francine said. No, I corrected. This is the same thing you demanded from me. Full disclosure before marriage. The only difference is, I was honest from the start. Donovan finally spoke. You investigated my father? I protected myself. The prenup wasn't just about money, it was about control. That morality clause would let your parents decide what counts as mental illness requiring institutionalization. They could take my children if I had a bad day. I stood up. Your father has the same condition I do. He's been managing it for decades. Built an empire. Raised 3 children. By your own standards, he should have been deemed unfit. Contaminated. That's different, Francine said. How? She had no answer. I wanted to get married, I said, looking at Donovan. I love you, but I won't enter a marriage where my illness is treated as a moral failing while your father's is a secret kept from his own children. So what do you want? Garrett asked, his voice hollow. I want the morality clause removed, completely. I want a prenup that's actually about protecting assets, not controlling behavior. And I want everyone in this room to understand that mental illness doesn't make someone contaminated. I gathered my papers. Dr. Morgan wanted me to give you this, I told Garrett, sliding an envelope across the table. She said she'd hoped you'd found peace, that hiding never brings peace. I walked to the door. I'll be at my apartment. Donovan, you know where to find me when you decide what matters more, your family's image or the truth. The drive home took 40 minutes. My hands shook the entire way. I'd gambled everything on this moment. Spent weeks researching, compiling evidence, planning every word. Morgan had been hesitant at first about revealing Garrett's treatment, but ultimately agreed that medical privacy mattered less than protecting me from a discriminatory contract. Back at my apartment, I made tea and waited. 3 hours passed, then 5. At midnight, my phone finally rang. It's me, Donovan said. I waited. Can I come over? That depends on what you want to say. Silence on the other end. I didn't know about my dad, he finally said. None of us did. Mom is... She's in shock. Celeste won't stop crying. Quentin left 2 hours ago. Said he needed to think. And you? I'm angry you didn't tell me what you were planning. Would you have let me go through with it? More silence. No, he admitted. I would have tried to talk you out of it. Said there had to be another way. There wasn't. Your parents weren't negotiating. They were dictating terms. I just showed them how hypocritical those terms were. By humiliating my father in front of his family. By telling the truth. Something your father should have done himself. I heard him exhale. He's devastated. Locked himself in his study. Won't talk to anyone. He's had 40 years to tell you. He chose not to. Maybe he had his reasons. The same reasons he wanted to use against me. Shame, fear, control. Donovan didn't respond. I'm sorry you found out this way, I said, but I'm not sorry I did it. That prenup would have destroyed me. Every mood swing, every bad day, every difficult moment would have been ammunition to take away my rights. My children, my life. I wouldn't have let that happen. You couldn't have stopped it. The prenup gave them that power. I heard a car door close on his end. I'm outside, he said. I looked through the window. His BMW was parked on the street. Are you going to let me in? I buzzed him up. When I opened the door, Donovan looked exhausted. His usually perfect hair was disheveled. His tie was loosened. He'd been crying. My whole life is a lie, he said, walking past me into the apartment. Your father's diagnosis doesn't change who he is. It changes everything. Every lecture about responsibility. Every demand for perfection. Every time he said we had to uphold the family name. Donovan collapsed onto my couch. He's a hypocrite. He's human and scared. You're defending him? I'm understanding him. I know what it's like to hide your diagnosis because you're terrified of how people will react. Donovan rubbed his face. Celeste is having her son evaluated tomorrow. She's been ignoring the signs for 2 years because she didn't want to admit something was wrong. Now she's terrified she passed it on to him. If she did, early intervention helps. I wish I'd gotten proper treatment sooner. Is that why you never told me? The question I'd been dreading. I told you my teenage years were difficult, that I'd struggled with my mental health. You never asked for details. That's not the same as telling me you'd been hospitalized. Multiple times. Would you have proposed if I had? He opened his mouth, then closed it. That was answer enough. I wanted to tell you, I said quietly. So many times. But every time your family talked about weakness or failure or maintaining image, I knew how they'd react. How you might react. I'm not my parents. No. But you're their son. You've absorbed their values whether you realize it or not. Donovan stood up, pacing. So what now? You've blown up my family, exposed my father's secret. What's your endgame? I don't have one. I just wanted to marry the man I love without signing away my humanity. The prenup was designed to give your parents leverage over me forever. You know it. I know it. Everyone at that table knew it. He stopped pacing. My mother wants to sue you for violating medical privacy laws. Dr. Morgan disclosed her own patient records with permission from her former patient. Your father. He signed the release 3 days ago. Donovan's eyes widened. What? I called him Tuesday, told him what I'd found, asked him to meet me. The meeting had been tense. Garrett had arrived at the coffee shop looking like he'd aged 10 years overnight. You can't tell them, he'd said immediately, then change the prenup. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. Remove the morality clause. Make it about assets, not control. Or I tell everyone at Sunday dinner. That's blackmail. That's protection. The same thing you're doing with that prenup. We'd sat in silence for 10 minutes. I was 17, he'd finally said. Arrested for reckless driving after staying awake for a week. I thought I'd discovered the secret to unlimited energy, that I could revolutionize the world. Manic episode. They diagnosed me with bipolar disorder, put me on medication. My father was furious, said I was weak, that Ashfords don't have mental problems. But you stayed on medication. After I stopped taking it and ended up in the hospital again, yes. Dr. Morgan convinced me that managing the condition was strength, not weakness. So why hide it from your children? Because my father was right about one thing. People judge. Investors. Business partners. Everyone. If it got out that I had bipolar disorder, everything I built could crumble. Or people would see you as someone who succeeded despite challenges. Someone who managed their health while building an empire. He'd laughed bitterly. You're idealistic. I'm realistic. Your company makes medications for mental illness. The irony of the CEO hiding his own diagnosis isn't lost on me, which is exactly why I can't let it be public knowledge. I'd slid the medical privacy release across the table. Sign this. Let me use your records to make my point, or I'll find another way. You'd destroy me to save yourself? I'd tell the truth to protect myself. There's a difference. He'd stared at the paper for a long time. If I sign this, you remove the morality clause? If you sign this, I show your family why that clause is discriminatory. What they choose to do after that is up to them. He'd signed it. Now Donovan stared at me in my apartment, processing this information. He agreed to let you expose him? He agreed to let me tell the truth. Whether that's exposure depends on perspective. My mother will never forgive you. Your mother discriminated against people with mental illness while married to someone with the same condition She doesn't get to be the victim here. Donovan sank back onto the couch. I don't know if I can. The words hit harder than expected. Because I have bipolar disorder? Because you manipulated my entire plotted and planned and orchestrated that whole scene. I protected myself by humiliating everyone I love, by showing them their hypocrisy. There's a difference. He stood up. I need time to process all of this. Take all the time you need. He walked to the door, then turned back. Did you ever really love me? Or was this always about beating my parents? I loved you enough to fight for a fair prenup instead of just walking away. If this was about beating your parents, I would have gone to the press, would have destroyed your father's reputation publicly. Instead, I kept it in the family, gave everyone a chance to do the right thing, by threatening my father, by giving him a choice, something your prenup never gave me. He left without another word. I spent the next week alone. No calls, no texts, nothing from Donovan or his family. My phone did ring once. Dr. Morgan, how are you holding up? She asked. I might have just destroyed my engagement, or you might have saved yourself from an abusive marriage. The Ashfords aren't abusive. Control masquerading as protection is still control. That morality clause was designed to keep you compliant through fear. That's emotional abuse. I hadn't thought of it that way. Garrett called me, she continued. He's angry I broke confidentiality. You didn't. He signed the release. Under duress, he claims. Under the same duress he wanted to put me under. Interesting how it feels different when you're on the receiving end. Dr. Morgan laughed. I told him the same thing. He didn't appreciate it. Is he still your patient? No. He fired me. Said I violated his trust. I'm sorry. Don't be. I violated his privacy to protect yours. I'd do it again. After we hung up, I stared at my phone. The wedding was supposed to be in 6 weeks. The venue was booked. The dress was altered. 300 people had RSVP'd. I called my best friend Zara. Tell me you're not actually going through with this wedding, she said immediately. I don't know. Donovan won't talk to me. Good. He's trash. He's hurt. He's complicit. His parents tried to trap you in a discriminatory contract and he went along with it because it's just paperwork. He doesn't deserve you. He didn't know about his father, which proves my point. That family keeps secrets, builds walls, controls narratives. You don't want to marry into that, but I did want to marry Donovan, despite everything. 2 weeks before the wedding, a courier delivered a package. Inside was a new prenup, 23 pages. The morality clause was gone. In its place was a simple asset protection agreement. What I brought into the marriage stayed mine. What he brought stayed his. Anything we built together would be split fairly if we divorced. There was a note. I understand why you did what you did. I don't agree with how you did it, but I also can't deny that our family needed to hear the truth. The wedding is still scheduled if you still want to marry me. If not, I understand. D. I called him. Did you write this prenup yourself? I hired a different lawyer, one who specializes in equitable agreements instead of control. And your parents approved it? They don't have a choice. I'm 32 years old. This is my marriage, not theirs. They'll never forgive me. Probably not. But they're going to therapy. All of them. Dad's been meeting with a new psychiatrist who specializes in helping patients who've hidden their diagnosis. Mom's in counseling to deal with the betrayal she feels. Celeste is working with her son's doctors. And Quentin? He moved out. Said he needed space from everyone. I'm sorry. Don't be. We needed this. The explosion. The truth. Everything was built on secrets and control. That's not sustainable. So, you want to get married? I want to marry you. I don't know if I can trust you completely, but I want to try. It wasn't a fairy tale declaration, but it was honest. I want to try too. The wedding was small. We'd canceled the original venue and rebooked a garden ceremony with 30 people instead of 300. Garrett and Francine attended but sat in the back. Celeste brought her son, now officially diagnosed with ADHD and starting treatment. Quentin sent a card but didn't come. My own family filled the front rows. My mother cried. My younger brother gave me away. When Donovan and I exchanged vows, his hands shook. I promised to love you in sickness and in health, he said, his voice cracking, and I promised to mean it. At the reception, Garrett pulled me aside. I want to show you something. He handed me his phone. On the screen was a press release draft. Ashford Pharmaceuticals is launching a new initiative, Mental Health Transparency in Corporate Leadership. I'm going to publicly disclose my diagnosis. Talk about living with bipolar disorder while running a company. Encourage other executives to be open about their mental health. I stared at the words. When did you decide this? When Celeste's son was diagnosed. He asked why he had to hide it, why he couldn't tell his friends. I realized I'd been teaching my grandson to be ashamed of something that wasn't shameful. This will change everything. I know, but you were right. Hiding never brings peace. The press release went live 3 days later. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Other CEOs began sharing their own mental health struggles. Ashford Pharmaceuticals stock actually rose as investors praised the transparency. Garrett was interviewed on national news. My future daughter-in-law taught me that you can't sell medication for mental health while discriminating against those who need it, he said. That hypocrisy nearly cost me my relationship with my son. I won't make that mistake again. He never mentioned how I'd forced his hand. The media painted it as a courageous personal choice. I didn't correct them. 6 months into our marriage, Donovan and I went to couples counseling. I'm still angry, he admitted in one session, about how you orchestrated everything, how you investigated my father, how you planned that dinner like a trial. I needed leverage, I said. Your parents wouldn't negotiate. They weren't treating me like a person. They were treating me like a liability. So you treated my father like a weapon. I treated him like an example. He'd been living proof for 40 years that bipolar disorder doesn't make someone unfit. That was the point. The point was blackmail. The point was survival. Our therapist, Dr. Vasquez, interrupted. Let's examine this from both perspectives. You, she looked at me, felt trapped by an unfair prenup and used the information you had to level the playing field. You, she turned to Donovan, felt your trust was violated when your partner investigated and exposed your family's secrets. Both of these feelings are valid. But one of us was facing discrimination, I said. And one of us had their family destroyed, Donovan countered. Your family destroyed itself with lies. You pulled the pin on the grenade. Dr. Vasquez held up her hand. The question isn't who was more right or more wrong. The question is whether you can rebuild trust moving forward. We worked on that for months. Slowly, things improved. Donovan started asking questions about my condition instead of avoiding the topic. I started being more direct about my needs instead of hiding behind strategy and planning. We created a crisis plan for if I had an episode, who to call, what medication adjustments to make, how he could support me without trying to fix me. It felt like learning to be married after already being married. A year later, I got pregnant. The first thing I did was call Dr. Morgan. I need to talk about medication adjustment during pregnancy. Already on it. Come in tomorrow. The consultation was thorough. Some of my medications were safe during pregnancy. Others needed to be changed. The risks were outlined clearly. You're more likely to have mood episodes during pregnancy and postpartum, Dr. Morgan explained. But with proper monitoring and medication, most people with bipolar disorder have healthy pregnancies. What about the baby, the genetic component? There's increased risk. But your children will also have access to early intervention and treatment you didn't have. Knowledge is protection. When I told Donovan, his first question was, what do you need from me? Not about the risks, not about his concerns, about my needs. I need you to trust that I can do this, that my diagnosis doesn't make me a bad mother. I never thought that. Your mother did. During the prenup discussion, she implied I'd be an unfit parent. My mother was wrong about a lot of things. Our son was born healthy. We named him Julian, after Dr. Morgan's father. Francine came to the hospital but stayed for only 20 minutes. She held Julian briefly, then left without saying much. Garrett stayed longer. He's perfect, he said, watching Julian sleep. He might have bipolar disorder. Then he'll have 2 grandfathers who understand what that's like, and parents who won't make him hide it. 2 grandfathers? He smiled sadly. My father died ashamed of me, ashamed of what I had. I won't do that to Julian or to you. It was the closest he'd ever come to an apology. Postpartum was difficult. My mood swings intensified. Dr. Morgan adjusted my medications 3 times in 4 months. Donovan took family leave, learned to recognize the warning signs of an episode before I did. One night, at 3 a.m., I found him sitting with Julian in the nursery. I'm terrified, he admitted, that I'll do what my father did. Hide things, build walls, teach him shame. Then don't. What if I can't help it? What if it's genetic, like bipolar disorder? Then you go to therapy and work on it, just like I manage my condition. He looked up at me. I love you. I'm still angry sometimes about how everything happened, but I love you. I love you too, even when you're angry. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. When Julian was 2, Celeste asked to meet for coffee. I owe you an apology, she said. For? The way I reacted at that dinner, what I said about you hiding your diagnosis. My son's been in treatment for 2 years now, and it's changed his life. If we'd caught it sooner, because we'd been more aware, more accepting, you were protecting him the only way you knew how. I was protecting myself from the truth, just like Dad did. She pulled out her phone and showed me a photo. He made the honor roll this semester. He's thriving, and he knows about his diagnosis. Knows it's nothing to be ashamed of. That's because you're teaching him better than you were taught. You did that. By refusing to accept our family's toxic patterns. By forcing us to confront the truth. I didn't do it to fix your family. I know. You did it to protect yourself, but it fixed us anyway. Quentin came back for Julian's 3rd birthday. I'm sorry I left, he told me while Julian destroyed his cake. I was overwhelmed. Angry at Dad for lying. Angry at Mom for being so rigid. Angry at you for blowing everything up. And now I'm in therapy, working through it, realizing our family needed the explosion. Donovan said the same thing, because it's true. We were all pretending everything was fine while Dad secretly medicated himself and Mom controlled everything. That's not sustainable. Is that why you're studying psychology? He'd enrolled in a counseling program 6 months ago. I want to help other families stuck in the same patterns. The secrets, the shame, all of it. Your father would be proud. Maybe. We don't talk much yet. Give it time. 3 years into our marriage, I received a call from a journalist. I'm writing an article about mental health stigma in corporate America. Your father-in-law's story is a key part of it. I'd love to include your perspective. How did you get my number? Garrett gave it to me, said you were instrumental in his decision to go public with his diagnosis. I almost laughed. Is that what he said? He said you showed him that hiding was hurting his family more than honesty ever could. That was one way to describe it. I'll have to think about it. He mentioned you might be hesitant. He wanted me to tell you something. What? He said to tell you that the truth always costs something, but the cost of hiding is always higher. I thought about it for a week. Then I agreed to the interview. The journalist, Priya, was thorough. Walk me through what happened, she said. How did you convince one of the most private CEOs in the pharmaceutical industry to publicly disclose his bipolar disorder? I didn't convince him. I showed him he was already living proof that the stigma was wrong. Can you elaborate? I told her about the prenup, the morality clause, the dinner where I'd revealed everything. She took notes furiously. So, you essentially used his own diagnosis against him to make a point about discrimination? I used his own diagnosis to show him that what he was demanding from me was something he'd never demanded from himself. Accountability. Some people would call that manipulation. Some people would call that self-defense. The article ran the following month. The headline, How One Woman's Disclosure Changed Mental Health Transparency in Corporate America. It was fair, showed both sides, included Garrett's perspective, Donovan's, and mine. The comments section was predictably divided. Some praised me for standing up to discrimination. Others called me manipulative and calculating. I stopped reading after the first 100 comments. Does it bother you? Donovan asked that night. What people are saying? Not really. They don't know the full story. Don't know what it's like to face a contract designed to strip away your rights at the first sign of illness. I didn't understand it either. Not until I saw Dad go through the same thing you did. The fear, the shame, the constant worry about being discovered. It's different when it's someone you love. It should have been different from the beginning. 5 years after the wedding, Francine finally invited us to Sunday dinner. Just immediate family, she said on the phone. I'd like to talk. We brought Julian, now a rambunctious 5-year-old obsessed with dinosaurs and mud. Garrett had aged well. The public disclosure had lifted something from him. He smiled more, laughed easier. Francine had aged harder. The cracks in her perfect facade had widened. I've been in therapy, she said over soup, for 3 years now. I know. Donovan told you? He mentioned it. She set down her spoon. I need to apologize to you. I waited. The prenup, the morality clause, all of it. I was trying to protect my family, protect our legacy, but I was really just trying to control things I was afraid of, like mental illness, like anything that threatened the image I'd built. The perfect family, the perfect life. I didn't want anything messy or complicated to ruin it. Life is messy and complicated. I know that now. Watching Garrett go through his disclosure, watching Celeste work with her son, it forced me to confront my own fears. And I'm sorry for treating you like a threat instead of a person, for trying to use a contract to control your health, for everything. It was the apology I'd wanted 5 years ago. Now it felt almost unnecessary. Thank you, I said simply. Do you forgive me? I'm working on it. It was the most honest answer I could give. That night, putting Julian to bed, he asked me a question. Mommy, why do you take medicine every day? Because I have a condition that needs managing. Like Grandpa Garrett? Donovan and I had been open with Julian about mental health from the start. Similar, yes. Will I need medicine too? Maybe, maybe not. But if you do, it's nothing to be ashamed of. Grandpa says medicine is what helps him be the best version of himself. Grandpa's right. Then medicine is magic. I smiled. Kind of, yeah. After Julian fell asleep, I found Donovan in our home office. Do you ever regret marrying me? I asked. He looked up from his laptop. Where is this coming from? Just wondering. If you had known everything about my condition, about what would happen with your family, would you still have proposed? He thought about it. I'd like to say yes immediately. But honest answer? I don't know. The version of me who proposed was naive, thought love conquered everything, thought my parents' demands were reasonable. And now? Now I know love isn't about conquering. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. That's not romantic. It's better than romantic. It's real. On our 5th anniversary, I got a letter. Dr. Morgan had passed away. The funeral was small, mostly former patients who credited her with saving their lives. Garrett spoke. Dr. Morgan taught me that mental illness wasn't weakness. That treatment was strength. That honesty was freedom. I didn't believe her for 30 years, but she never stopped believing in me. After the service, I found her daughter. Mom left something for you, she said, handing me an envelope. Inside was a letter dated a week before Dr. Morgan died. Dear friend, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I wanted you to know how proud I am of you, for fighting for yourself, for refusing to accept discrimination, for teaching an old patient of mine that hiding helps no one. Garrett came to see me last month, told me everything that happened, how you'd used his records to protect yourself, how angry he'd been, how grateful he was now. She did what I couldn't, he said. She told the truth when it mattered. You changed more than one life when you spoke up at that dinner. You changed a family, a company, a culture. That takes courage I'm not sure I would have had. Keep fighting, keep speaking, keep living openly. The world needs more people like you. With admiration, Patricia Morgan. I read it 3 times before putting it away. That night I told Donovan about the letter. She was right, he said. You changed everything. I just refused to be controlled. which changed everything. 7 years after the wedding, Julian started second grade. His teacher called a month into the school year. I wanted to discuss Julian's behavior. He's been very open about his grandfather's bipolar disorder. Some of the other parents are concerned. Concerned about what? Whether it's appropriate for a 7-year-old to discuss mental health so openly. I took a breath. Julian's grandfather is a public figure who chose to disclose his diagnosis to reduce stigma. Julian is proud of his grandfather. There's nothing inappropriate about that. Some parents worry it might scare other children. Why would mental illness scare children unless adults teach them to be scared? Silence on the other end. I'll talk to the principal, she finally said. You do that. And while you're at it, tell those concerned parents that mental illness affects 1 in 4 families. Their children are going to encounter it eventually. Better they learn about it from a kid who sees it as normal than from their own fears. I hung up and called Garrett. Julian's teacher is getting complaints about him talking about your bipolar disorder. What kind of complaints? The kind that say mental illness is too scary for 7-year-olds to understand. But war and divorce and death aren't? Apparently not, he sighed. I'll call the school. Make a donation to their mental health education program. One that doesn't exist yet, but will by the end of the week. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. Julian shouldn't face consequences for refusing to hide what I hid for 40 years. 2 weeks later, Ashford Pharmaceuticals launched a school mental health initiative. Julian's school was the first recipient. The program included age-appropriate education about mental health, trained counselors, and resources for families. Think they'll still be concerned? Garrett asked at the launch event. They'll find something else to complain about. Let them. We're done hiding. When Julian turned 8, he asked me directly, Mom, do I have bipolar disorder like you and Grandpa? We don't know yet. Some people develop symptoms in their teens. Some never do. But I might? You might. Would that be bad? It would be challenging, but it wouldn't be bad. You'd have medication and therapy and people who understand. Like you and Grandpa? Exactly like us. Then I think I'd be okay. His confidence broke something in me, in the best way. This was what I'd fought for. A child who didn't fear his own brain, who saw mental illness as manageable instead of shameful. By year 10 of our marriage, the Ashford family looked completely different. Garrett had stepped down as CEO to focus on mental health advocacy. Francine had started a foundation for families dealing with mental illness. Celeste's son was thriving in mainstream school with proper supports. Quentin was a licensed therapist specializing in family systems. And Donovan and I had 3 children. Julian at 10 was still obsessed with dinosaurs. Our daughter Mira at 7 was an artist who painted feelings instead of things. And our youngest, Cole, at 4, was convinced he could talk to plants. None of them had shown signs of bipolar disorder yet, but we were prepared if they did. Do you think about that dinner? Donovan asked one night after the kids were asleep. The one where you revealed everything? Sometimes. Do you regret it? Not even a little. Do you? He thought about it. I regret that it had to happen that way, but I don't regret where it led us. To therapy? To truth, which is basically the same thing. I laughed. Your father said something similar at Mira's birthday party. That truth and therapy are the same thing? That honesty is the hardest medicine to swallow, but the most effective. Very on brand for a pharmaceutical CEO. Former CEO. He's still got the vocabulary. We sat in comfortable silence. I love you, Donovan said eventually, even though you're ruthless when cornered. I love you too, even though you're oblivious when comfortable. That's fair. On our 15th anniversary, Garrett pulled me aside at the party. I never thanked you properly. For forcing me to live honestly. Those first few years after going public were terrifying. But now, I can't imagine living any other way. You did the hard part. I just gave you a push. You gave me a shove off a cliff. There's a difference. And you learned to fly. He smiled. The company's mental health initiative has helped over 200,000 people access treatment. We've changed our employee health coverage to include comprehensive mental health benefits. We've funded research into new medications, all because you refused to sign a discriminatory prenup. I just didn't want to be controlled. You didn't want to be controlled, so you changed the world instead. Most people just walk away. I thought about it. Why didn't you? Because I loved your son, and I knew if I walked away, nothing would change. The next woman he fell in love with would face the same prenup, the same clause, the same discrimination. So you stayed and fought. I stayed and told the truth. The fight came after. He pulled out an envelope. This is for you. Inside was a check for $500,000. What is this? Your consulting fee. For the mental health initiative. You helped design the program, spoke at the launch events, advised on the education materials. You should be compensated. I didn't do it for money. I know, which is why I'm paying you anyway. Consider it back payment for the therapy you didn't charge me for during that dinner. I tried to give it back. Keep it. Invest it. Save it. Use it to start your own initiative. Whatever you want, but don't refuse it because you don't think you deserve it. That night, I stared at the check. $500,000 for refusing to be silent, for protecting myself, for changing a family and a company and a culture. What are you going to do with it? Donovan asked. I'm going to start a legal fund for people facing discriminatory prenups or contracts because of mental illness. They'll have lawyers, resources, support. That's perfect. And terrifying. I don't know anything about running an organization. You knew nothing about taking down a pharmaceutical family's secret either. You figured it out. Fair point. The fund launched 6 months later. Within a year, we'd helped 43 people negotiate fair prenups. Within 2 years, we'd changed state law to make morality clauses based on mental health conditions unenforceable. Within 3 years, we'd expanded nationally. You've helped more people than I ever did selling medication, Garrett said at our 3rd annual fundraiser. I had a good teacher in standing up to corporate power. I wasn't the teacher in that scenario. No, but you learned the lesson well. He raised his glass. To telling the truth, even when it costs everything. To telling the truth because hiding costs more. 20 years after that Sunday dinner, I was invited to speak at a conference on mental health and discrimination. The room was packed with lawyers, advocates, medical professionals. I told the story of the prenup, the morality clause, the dinner where everything changed. I was terrified, I admitted to the audience. Terrified of losing the man I loved. Terrified of exposing myself. Terrified of what would happen when I revealed everything. But I was more terrified of signing away my humanity, of agreeing that my illness made me less deserving of protection, of teaching my future children that mental health conditions were something to hide. So I gathered my evidence, planned my disclosure, and told the truth at the worst possible moment. Some people call that manipulation. I call it survival. Because when you're facing a contract designed to control you through fear, you have two choices. Sign it and lose yourself, or fight it and risk everything. I risked everything, and I gained more than I ever imagined. The standing ovation lasted 5 minutes. Afterward, a young woman approached me. My fiancé's family wants me to sign a similar prenup, with a morality clause because I have depression. I've been trying to figure out how to handle it. Do they know you have depression? Yes, but they think it means I'll be an unfit wife and mother. Then you tell them exactly what I told the Ashfords. That mental illness doesn't make someone unfit. That treatment is strength, that their terms are discriminatory. And if they don't listen, then you walk away. Because anyone who thinks you're unfit because of a diagnosis doesn't deserve to be part of your life. She hugged me, crying. Thank you. I needed to hear that. After she left, Donovan appeared at my side. Still changing lives, I see. Just telling the truth. Same thing. We walked to the car in comfortable silence. Do you remember what I said that night? He asked. When I came to your apartment after the dinner? You said you weren't sure if you could marry me. I said I didn't know if I could trust you. Big difference. And can you? Trust me? Completely. Because I learned that your version of protection looks like truth-telling, even when it's brutal. I'll take brutal honesty over comfortable lies every time. That's the mental health advocacy talking. That's 20 years of marriage talking. At home, Julian, now 30 and a psychiatrist, was visiting with his wife and our first grandchild. Gran, tell me the story again, our granddaughter begged. Which story? The one where you fought the bad contract. Julian smiled. She asks about it constantly. I think you're her superhero. I'm not a superhero, I just refuse to be controlled. That's what superheroes do, our granddaughter insisted. Maybe she was right. That night, after everyone had left, I pulled out the old prenup. 47 pages of restrictions and control. I'd kept it all these years as a reminder of what I'd refused, of what I'd fought for, of what I'd changed. Donovan found me in the study. Thinking about burning that yet? Maybe. Or maybe I'll donate it to a museum of discriminatory contracts. That's oddly specific. There's a legal history museum in Boston. They collect documents that show how far we've come and how far we still need to go. Exactly. He sat beside me. Any regrets? About how it all happened? I regret that it had to happen at all. That your parents thought a morality clause was reasonable. That your father hid his diagnosis for 40 years. That I had to choose between signing an unfair contract or blowing up your family. But I don't regret the choice I made. I protected myself and accidentally protected your whole family in the process. Very accidentally. The best revolutions are. We sat in silence, looking at the document that had changed everything. You know what the strangest part is? Donovan said eventually. What? My father thanks you every year on his disclosure anniversary, sends you flowers, calls it his second birthday. Because he's dramatic. Because it's true. He started living honestly that day. Everything good that came after. The advocacy, the changed company culture, the relationship with his grandkids. It all started with you refusing to sign that prenup. It started with me refusing to hide. Same thing. Maybe it was. 25 years after the dinner, Garrett passed away. His obituary mentioned his mental health advocacy before his pharmaceutical work. Garrett Ashford, champion of mental health transparency, dies at 84. At the funeral, hundreds of people shared stories. Stories of how his disclosure had given them courage, how his advocacy had changed their lives, how his honesty had saved them. Dad talked about that dinner until the end, Quentin said during his eulogy. The night his future daughter-in-law exposed his 40-year secret. He said it was the worst night of his life and the beginning of his real life at the same time. Celeste added, he told me once that he'd spent 4 decades being afraid of discovery, that the fear of exposure was worse than any actual consequences. That honesty had freed him from a prison of his own making. After the funeral, Francine pulled me aside. I need to tell you something. What? I was wrong. About everything. The prenup. The morality clause. The way I treated you. All of it. I know. Do you forgive me? I'd been asked that question before. This time the answer was different. Yes. She cried then, for the first time since I'd known her. Garrett said you would. He said you were tougher and more forgiving than anyone he'd ever met. That most people who survive what you did become bitter, but you became better. I had good medication. She laughed through tears. He would have loved that answer. At home that night, I pulled out Dr. Morgan's letter again, read it for the 100th time. You changed more than one life when you spoke up at that dinner. She'd been right, but I hadn't known it then. I'd just been trying to survive, to protect myself from an unfair contract and a discriminatory clause. Everything else, the family transformation, the company changes, the advocacy work, the legal reform, had been unintended consequences. The best kind. What are you thinking about? Donovan asked, finding me in the study again. Your father, Dr. Morgan, that dinner, all of it. Heavy thoughts for midnight. Just remembering how scared I was. How close I came to signing that prenup just to keep the peace. What stopped you? I thought about spending the rest of my life looking over my shoulder, wondering if every bad day would be used against me. If every medication adjustment would be seen as proof I was unfit, I couldn't do it, so you fought instead. So I told the truth instead. The fighting came after. He pulled me close. I'm glad you did. All of it. Even the parts I didn't understand at the time. Even the manipulation. Even the strategic truth-telling, which is what we're calling it now. I smiled. Very diplomatic. I've had 25 years of practice. Our youngest, Cole, called from Portland. Mom, I need to tell you something. My heart stopped. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. I've been seeing a therapist. We think I might have bipolar disorder. We're starting evaluation next week. I exhaled. Okay, that's okay. Do you need me to come out there? No, I just wanted to tell you, and to say thank you. For what? For making it okay. For fighting so I wouldn't have to hide. For changing our family so I could get help without shame. After we hung up, Donovan looked at me. Is he okay? He's better than okay. He's getting evaluated. Getting help. Doing exactly what he should do. Because of you. Because of all of us. Your father's disclosure. Our honesty. The family culture we built. Which started with you and a prenup. Which started with me refusing to hide. At 30 years married, the legal fund I'd started had helped over 10,000 people. Changed laws in 43 states. Trained thousands of lawyers in identifying and challenging discriminatory contracts. You should write a book, Zara suggested over lunch. Tell the whole story. Who wants to read about prenups and mental health discrimination? Everyone who's ever faced something similar. Everyone who's been asked to sign away their dignity for love. Everyone who's hidden part of themselves to be accepted. That's a depressing audience. That's most people. She had a point. I spent the next 2 years writing, not just about the prenup, but about living with bipolar disorder, about medication and stability, about loving someone despite, or because of, the chaos that came with mental illness, about building a family where honesty mattered more than image. The book came out to positive reviews, an unflinching look at mental health discrimination and the courage it takes to fight back, a testament to the power of truth-telling in changing systems. Required reading for anyone navigating mental illness in their family or themselves. At the book launch, I read from the final chapter. I didn't set out to change anything. I just refused to be diminished by a diagnosis I couldn't control. That refusal changed a family, changed a company, changed laws and lives and systems. But it started small, with a prenup I wouldn't sign, with a truth I wouldn't hide, with a moment at a Sunday dinner when I decided my dignity mattered more than their comfort. Every revolution starts that way, with someone saying no to injustice. Even when saying no costs everything, I was willing to lose love to keep my humanity. Turns out, I didn't have to choose, but I had to be willing to. The applause filled the bookstore. Afterward, dozens of people lined up to share their stories. Stories of prenups they'd signed and regretted. Stories of diagnoses they'd hidden. Stories of families they'd lost to discrimination. Stories of courage they'd found after reading mine. You gave me permission to fight back, one woman said. You showed me I wasn't alone, a man added. You changed my life, a teenager whispered. I hadn't set out to change anyone's life. I just refused to sign a contract that treated me as less than human. Everything else had followed. At 35 years married, Donovan and I renewed our vows. Small ceremony, just family, Julian and his wife, Mira and her partner, Cole and his boyfriend, all our grandchildren, Quentin, Celeste, Francine. Even Garrett's chair sat empty at the front, reserved in memory. 35 years ago, I said during the ceremony, I almost didn't marry this man. His family wanted me to sign a contract that would have controlled me through fear. I refused. That refusal changed everything. I looked at Donovan. You asked me once if I'd had an endgame, a plan beyond exposing your father and fighting the prenup. I didn't. I just wanted to be seen as fully human. Wanted to marry someone who loved all of me, including the parts that needed medication and management. You gave me that. Eventually, after a lot of therapy and honest conversations and painful growth, but you gave me that. So I'm saying yes again. To you, to us, to this messy, complicated, beautiful life we've built. Donovan's vows were simpler. I promise to keep choosing honesty over comfort, to keep believing you when you tell me what you need, to keep learning and growing and showing up, especially when it's hard. I promise to keep being married to you for as long as you'll have me, which is forever, I whispered, which is forever. He agreed. That night, I added one final entry to the journal I'd kept since that Sunday dinner 35 years ago. Today, I married Donovan again, chose him again, chose this life again. I've spent 35 years living openly with bipolar disorder, raising children who might inherit it, building a family where mental illness isn't shameful, fighting for others who face the same discrimination I did. It started with refusing to hide. It became a life, a good one, the best one. And it all started with a prenup I wouldn't sign and a truth I wouldn't silence. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is refuse to be smaller than you are. Sometimes that refusal changes everything. Mine did.